Hello,
nothing,
and...
sorry.
Oh, you're right.
So I'll just get naked.
Oh, lovely. Get all, yeah.
Yeah, no, the baby oil was unnecessary, mate.
Yeah. You didn't need to paint yourself blue. Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
He desperately needs her to survive.
It sort of handled some incredibly delicate topics incredibly well.
I will never watch this again. What was that?
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar.
I'm James Smith.
Let me just go and change my shirt.
All right. Hello and welcome back to Off Radar. My name is James Smith and I am joined by James Eatock.
Howdy.
And Neil Brock.
Hello there.
Who we call Nige. So today we are talking about Avatar, which I suggested, and the reason I suggested it is because the second film is coming out in December this year, and I think we've waited a long time since the first one. The first one came out in 2009.
Yeah, that blew my mind. When I was looking back to when I watched it, I was like, 2009?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? I was reading just before we kind of came on here that the development that Cameron started on Avatar, the first one, he began in 1994. He wrote an 80-page treatment for the film, and the filming was going to start after Titanic in 97, but the technology just wasn't there. So
hang on a sec. I've got to stop you. This sounds like you're treading on Nige's toes slightly.
I was going to jump in and say it was only after James Cameron watched Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers in 2002, was he like, aha, the CGI technology is here, away we go. And that was when that's
what took it off. Wow.
But even then, it was still 7 years after that. So it just goes to show how long a development.
It's crazy. And then obviously the next one that's coming out in a month, or in December, when
The Way of Water, is it called?
I mean, we've had to wait so long for that, and again, it's because I think I was reading that the motion capture kind of technology underwater was not ready when they first did the original Avatar, and now we've got about 5 of them coming out in the next 3 or 4 years.
Something else about Avatar that kind of gets a bit overlooked is it was right in the middle of that big 3D phase where everyone for about 3 years was like, 3D's really good, let's make everything 3D.
That's right. I was going to ask you guys, where and when did you first see this film?
Eatock? Well, Eatock and I watched it together in a...
That's a secret.
Nige, don't tell anyone.
I saw it at the Enfield Cineworld. I think it was literally the day after it came out, or the day it came out, and I did see it in 3D. And I was so, not to spoil the actual review part, but I really bought into the hype of this movie because it was huge. It was the first movie I'd ever been in a cinema where, when the end credits started rolling, the audience applauded. And obviously that is now, it was such an American tradition but then it became, with the Marvel Universe movies at the MCU, that almost became like the norm. After most Marvel movies, people would clap. I saw that happen so much and cheer and whoop.
I think I've only ever seen it after Star Wars, the Phantom Menace. After that, I was like, in an eruptious cinema after however many, 20, 30 years of, or probably longer actually, since the original films. But
yeah, it was. I'd never seen that in a cinema. I was just like, wow, and all these people cheering, applauding. I came out the cinema. I got on a bus, and I hurriedly text a bunch of people saying, I've seen Avatar. It's amazing. It's one of the most amazing movies I ever saw. And I think you two were probably on that text message. I remember texting, just a bunch of people, like almost like the fear of missing out. Like, I've seen it, everybody. And it's so weird looking back. But yeah, just it was a proper huge movie, and nobody had seen a second of it at that point. It was just like, it's going to be massive. So yeah, that's I have seen it in 3D.
See, I've not seen it in 3D, nor did I see it at the IMAX. I think I just saw it on TV maybe a year or a couple of years after it came out. Like when I was living in Balham, in fact, with a couple of flatmates. I think we just watched it there, and it was just like, yeah, let's watch Avatar, and then we did.
Oh, okay. So I watched it at the IMAX in 3D, and like Etok, like visually I was kind of astonished and spellbound by what I've just experienced, and 3D, like for maybe, like you just said, like 2 or 3 years, that was like, 3D is how we're going to watch films in the future constantly, every big film. And I think there were about maybe 3 or 4, like Dark Knight and a couple of others I watched, but other than that, it's really kind of petered off. And Avatar was a film designed to be shot properly in 3D with the 3D cameras, not like not shooting it old school,
retrofitted kind of thing.
Yeah, not doing it afterwards. So they actually shot it in 3D.
Yeah, I remember seeing some making of it. And that was the first time. There's probably like other films that had shown the making of, but they showed the cameras with the double lens, and I was like, ooh, fancy. So yeah, it was. I was like, oh wow, they really are going for it.
I think I've only ever seen one film at the cinema in 3D, and that was Fright Night, the Colin Farrell remake.
Oh wow, I was going to say the original.
And it was actually far better than I expected. And I don't know how much of that was down to the film just being quite good, and how much was the 3D factor. But I can't recall having seen one since in 3D. Obviously, like you said, it disappeared as a thing. People got a bit fed up with taking those glasses in and everything that sort of came with it. It just...
Well, you had to buy the glasses. I mean, me, Etok, and a friend of ours, Mark, we went and saw The Force Awakens in 3D, and we stupidly bought these like Stormtrooper glasses and paid like 20 quid for them, and now they're sitting in a drawer in my house and have never been used since.
I think I threw mine in a bin or gave them to like a homeless person or something.
So they can see in 3D.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
I can see.
Feel for the poor people who bought 3D TVs as well.
Yeah.
When they were a thing. Like I had a friend who bought one. It was just like, why?
I would say I was working at Sony around the time this was all kicking off, like 2010, 2011, I think, when they were really pushing Sky 3D. And I remember we had like a Blu-ray disc, and we had the specs and everything. And the best film I ever saw in 3D, bear in mind, I went to the cinema and saw quite a lot of films in 3D. A lot of those early Marvel ones you could see in 3D as well. But then there came a time when we were just like, can we just see it without that slight tint not there? Because obviously there'd be a tinted thing when you're wearing the shades. But when I was working at Sony, we had this disc, and it was like a demonstration of all these 3D movies. And the best 3D movie I ever saw, and it was almost like it became a demo piece at Sony. We would show people, be like, you got to check this out. This is what the capabilities of 3D, was a film called Step Up 3D. And it's like
the dancing
one.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's astonishing how good the 3D is, because they do these moments when they're dancing almost to the camera. So you're watching, it's like a dance-off thing, and they're dancing to the camera, and the level of 3D is stupid. It's crazy. I was just like, this is... But you even back then, even going to the cinema and seeing these 3D movies, you kind of knew it was just a fad, because 3D has only ever been a fad. I remember in the 80s, BBC Two every once in a while in the 1980s would broadcast 3D movies, but they would be done with the red and green or red and blue, and you would watch it on your telly with a pair of 3D specs. This is like as early as 1983, 1984.
Jaws 3D was one, and then
there you go.
One of the Freddy films as well, Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that was 3D as well.
I think you're right.
Freddy 3 or Freddy 4. Honestly, I can't remember, but there was that little burst during that period as well, and it sort of takes you back to that kind of classic American cinema. But at the same time, it died on its arse eventually, and history often repeats itself. So
definitely. And I mean, there were certain films like Avatar, which when you saw it at the time, and a visual spectacle like that, like this film, it kind of you know, it was great. It was great to see it at the cinema in IMAX in 3D. I don't know if they still show films like that, because I haven't seen one probably in 10 years, but and my interest in that is not. But I think Avatar was one of those films that I'm really pleased I did see in that way, because, you know, you felt like you actually did go to Pandora.
You Jake Sully?
I'd like to talk to you about a fresh start on a new world. You'd be making a difference.
I became a Marine for the hardship. I told myself I can pass any test a man can pass. All I ever wanted was a single thing worth fighting for.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are not in Kansas anymore. You are on Pandora.
Avatar itself, as I said, 2009, written and directed by James Cameron. It stars Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Sigourney Weaver, Stephen Lang, and then you've also got like a whole host of supporting cast, like our friend Giovanni Ribisi, who pops up, and a number of other people that come up in the film that I'm sure we'll get to. I'll just give you a brief synopsis. So the film is set in the 22nd century, and humans are trying to colonise a gas planet called Pandora. The humans are mining for a valuable mineral, and they come up against an indigenous tribe called the Navi tribe. The Navi tribe are 10-foot tall, blue, sapient humanoids that live in harmony with nature. And basically the humans have found a way of entering a host's body, which is a Navi, an avatar, which looks a lot like their kind of human self. So they can interact with the natives, understand them. And Sam Worthington's character, Jake, is a disabled ex-soldier. He's sent to Pandora to replace his twin's role, who died, and begins the journey of becoming one of these tribe. He then meets a girl called Nige, who is one of these tribe, played by Zoe Saldana. And the film kind of, is his journey into becoming one of these big blue people, battling in his own misconceptions.
You make him sound like a
fucking Smurf.
Smurf, yeah.
Smurf. I'm the daddy Smurf. I'm not the papa. I'm the daddy.
And he basically he begins to question his own morals and values.
You should see your faces.
We have an indigenous population called the Navi. They are very hard to kill.
This is why we're here. Because this little gray rock sells for $20 million a kilo. Their village happens to be resting on the richest deposit, and they need to relocate. Those savages are threatening our whole operation.
The most kind of obvious thing with this film is the kind of commentary on mankind.
So the Fern Gully ripoff is what you said.
I was just...
Yes.
No, stop it.
I'm inside your mind.
This is so weird. I was about to say, Fern Gully.
Yeah.
Kind of, the loss of nature, destroying, people's lives and their livelihoods.
All for the almighty dollar kind of thing, isn't it? It's all about commercialism and destruction and being like American, maybe maybe at the time it was pointed at that. As we've been recording this, what the thing that really jumped out at me is the Brazilian kind of election's been on, and Bolsonaro was has just been voted out. Well, doesn't agree with it at this stage.
Oh no, he's just like Trump. But basically, under Bolsonaro, he kind of lifted all restrictions on, the Amazon being illegally kind of, taken down and stuff like that. And then also, indigenous people were being kind of, kicked out of their homes by these like illegal loggers and stuff like that. And
slaughtered as well, yeah.
He removed all of those restrictions and capped budgets for environmental charities massively.
He's a dick.
Very controversial right-wing, and we know we've got quite a lot of Brazilian listeners on this podcast, so it'd be interesting to hear what you think about the
you may have just lost the load.
I've maybe lost the right.
The budget on this film was rather extraordinary. Like you said, it took them so long to actually put it together, but 237 million was the budget, and
Wow.
it made almost $3 billion. And certainly at the time was the highest gross grossing movie.
Bear in mind what he did, and I kind of, part of me is like, oh, you dick, but also I totally understand why he did it, was that his movie, I think the first one made just over 2 billion and then, or something, and then Avengers Endgame, or one of the Marvel movies, became the biggest film of all time. And so he re-released Avatar to make sure that he still held that record. And it's
so has it got the record again now?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, because
it's
he
been
re-released
this year, in time for the second one coming out.
Yeah, and I think I think it once again is the number one movie of all time. Like, not to going back to what Nige says, what did he go? Like, I'm sure there may have been some in between, but his ones are, when you think about it, Terminator 2, Titanic, and then Avatar. It's those three. Did he do anything in between?
Well, the Abyss, don't forget.
That's 87. But yeah, it's like, no, 89. Because I saw it in Canada in the summer of 89.
It's kind of got a very similar vibe in the fact a lot of that's about the environment. There's the link with the water, which for the Avatar sequels, obviously very prominent in that. But in terms of other films, like obviously Titanic was absolutely huge. Aliens, of course, as well. But yeah, in terms of his he tends to take his time. I know he did a documentary as well about the raising of the Titanic. I think it was.
That's right.
Like that.
Yeah.
So he really does take his time in between his movies. And then one of my personal favourites as well, which kind of gets a little bit overlooked, even though I know we're all big fans of it on this podcast, is of course True Lies with our good mate Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
So yeah, he. Even though they're all kind of similar in the sense of, you could probably say they're all quite big, bold films, quite action-packed to an extent, they have slightly different charms about them.
One of the things that struck me, like when watching Avatar, was like some of the influences of the other films in this film. So like the start of the film, like all the spaceship is all really blue. It's got that T2 kind of tint to it. And then when we go into Pandora, like the colours, you mentioned the Abyss, which I only watched for the first time about 3 months ago. Like all the purples and the kind of bold colours, like kind of shine through in that. It feels like he's kind of taken all these bits of his kind of technology and ideas from his older stuff and brought them into this film.
Well, with James Cameron especially, he has like kind of a list of things that he does. You could almost argue he's an auteur in the sense of, like, James Horner quite often does his soundtrack, and it's quite similar to some of his other films. You can certainly see the influence of Aliens with the casting as well. You talked about T2 and True Lies, obviously that Arnie link. You look at Aliens, you look at Avatar, Sigourney Weaver, of course, and he did actually consider casting Michael Biehn as the Colonel Miles.
Wow, really?
Who Stephen Lang portrayed. And I think he'd have been perfect, but he was so worried that everyone was just saying, oh, this is just Aliens, but with blue people kind of thing, and he sort of decided to go against it. But yeah, he definitely has that sort of style, and certainly the way he shoots his films. And even though he said, I think, during the filming of this, it was like, he really enjoyed being outside of his comfort zone in this position where it almost like he was starting again, because what he was trying to do was so groundbreaking in terms of like the level of CGI, this whole brand new world almost built out of nothing. And yeah, just the kind of the craziness. If you look at this story, we've tried to describe it. Sort of Marine who can't walk becomes a big blue person and charges around the rainforest. On paper, This film is a disaster. This film is a huge flop. Even today, I'm surprised that this film was as big as it was, because it doesn't necessarily have that obvious mass appeal that perhaps even like his films like Titanic probably did. So,
well, no, it's true. And I think one of the biggest appeals of this is what you've just said, is this new planet, is Pandora. It's creating this utopian world that, like it or not, when you watch this film, you're drawn into it and you go into this world. You know, the vibrant colours, the kind of the creatures that look familiar but they're made up creatures. And then
they've all got 6 legs for some reason. It's just really weird.
Or like
it's like a dog, but he's got 6 legs. Yeah.
The bright blues, the purples. There's like so much of this, like, if it's done badly, could look really, really shit. But because it's done so well, this, like the first, time Sam Worthington's character Jake goes into this world, you're kind of going on this journey with him and you're exploring the world with him.
Looks like you. This is your avatar.
Just
Just relax and let your mind go blank. It shouldn't be hard for you.
I think one of my favourite parts of the visuals is the faces of the blue people, of the Smurfs, because it's amazing when, like, I was watching it and I'll be honest, like, this kind of hints at my review, I'd forgotten, I'd say 99% of this movie. So I'm watching it, and when, you know, he first becomes Smurf Man, he's walking around, and then, you know, he starts running and he bumps into Sigourney Weaver, and immediately, even before she opens her mouth, you're like, oh, that's Sigourney Weaver's character, her avatar, because they captured the elements of the people's faces. Like, Sigourney Weaver's always got that kind of wide smile and those eyes, and it's just like, that's Sigourney Weaver as an avatar. Same with Zoe Saldana and Sam Worthington even. He looks... Yeah, it's so clever how they, you know, they could have just, I know they wouldn't with a budget like that, but you could effortlessly phone it in and just go, here's what a female avatar looks like, here's what a male one looks like. But they went into every character face. You're like, oh my God, that is Sigourney Weaver. That's the way her mannerisms are. That's the way, and it's their ability to translate that from, you know, actors. And obviously it was all done with, like... I can't believe you
didn't say transform. Like, I just thought
transform. It sounded too obvious. But the way they're able to do that, and you're just like, wow, this... I think that's almost like the best part of the movie, is just seeing those actors and then being able to act through the CGI.
They needed that buy-in, though, with Sigourney Weaver. I think she's the key. Like, without her, like, Sam Worthington was a bit of an unknown when he was cast. You're absolutely right. As soon as you see her and you see, oh, that's Sigourney Weaver's character, and you can make that attachment, I think that basically sets the film almost in motion from that point of, like, right, I can buy into this now. It's not just a blue CGI blob, whatever you want to call it, on the screen.
Sigourney Weaver's character is really interesting because at the start of this film, she starts off, she's quite direct and controlling at the start, and you don't really like her, and all of a sudden, like, she becomes like one of the most likable characters in the film. And really interesting how they kind of played with her character.
It's funny you say that, because like yourself, I hadn't seen it since I watched it in however many years ago, and I went into watching it again thinking she was the sort of bad guy of the film. I honestly thought that's what it was. I couldn't really remember that much. I think it speaks volumes that we've all kind of said we can't really remember this film that well, but yeah, I thought she was sort of the bad person. But she said she modelled her character on James Cameron, in the sense of, like, he's so incredibly passionate and narrow-minded and focused on a certain thing. And her character clearly is in this about the environment, about the people, about wanting to kind of do the good side of sort of exploring and understanding who they are, compared with obviously the military of just all about destruction and resourcing and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, she said she modelled it on him, and he took it as a compliment. So there you go. Didn't leave her on the cutting room floor.
A direct, controlling, yet likeable person. Okay, fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a director, I guess. And then what about so Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana? So what about their relationship? What did you guys think of that?
I think that it came across genuine, and it's one of my criticisms of the movie. I don't know how much you can get invested in watching CGI characters after a while. Don't get me wrong, this is coming from someone who passionately loves animation and can get invested in character relations. But I just feel that, something with these characters, you know, it feels genuine, but I think they're so far removed that I'm just sort of like,
For me, the thing that didn't work between them was, I agree, the kind of the CGI-ness kind of gets lost a little bit in this love story that develops really predictably, but the dialogue is pretty clunky and
oh god, you ain't kidding,
badly written, which is really strange coming from, you know, James Cameron. And
also an amazing cast as well.
An amazing cast, but it feels so cheesy, and you know, that's not helped by some of the music and, you know, what this film has tried to be. But unfortunately for me, that kind of spoilt their chemistry, or lack of, in this film.
I think Etox touched upon it, and I'm wary about going too deep into this without jumping into my review, but I found it extraordinarily difficult to connect with this film, both the first time I watched it and this latest time, where like Etok, I'm a big animation fan. I'm a big fan of computer games as well, like the stories that are told in them. But with this film, it just feels so detached from emotion, from reality, from interest. I just found it so difficult to feel engaged with this. It was like watching it, and this is almost a review. It's like watching a commercial for 3 hours. It's just something on in the background.
I want you to learn from the inside. I want you to gain their trust.
You should not be here. Go back. All this is your fault.
I think one of the problems about this movie is that it was such a game changer, as in, or it tried to be, as like, look what we can do. We can create completely 3D worlds that you will immerse yourself in. The problem is, as you've both said now, it's like, I don't think you can immerse yourself enough to connect with them. And you just feel like Nige said, like you're watching an advert, or you're watching a commercial for, look what we can do with computers now. It's like, wow, that's really amazing. You can create really beautiful visuals. It's like, no, you must care about this world. And it's like, why is that? And it's like, because we've written this very vague script about, like we basically ripped off Fern Gully. And I will always like respect this film for what it did in terms of by creating this film. I'm sure all the 3D houses and animation houses, it caused them to up their game and their technology. There's no doubt it had an impact on the industry going forward. But as a film, I just don't really think it works.
I think one of the reasons I didn't connect enough with that, as well as that, was for me, Jake's character in particular. His backstory is so weak that all we know is, he's a disabled ex-soldier. He's had a twin brother, and I was like, why do I care that he's got a twin brother? Like, I really didn't give a shit that he's got a twin brother that used to be there. That felt totally irrelevant to me.
It's about the genes, isn't it? That's the only reason he can be in the Avatar.
Yeah.
So
right. Oh, fine. Okay, that totally missed my. But obviously the fact he's disabled, like I get why they're doing that. Like, look, you're free. You are no longer disabled, and
you can run, you can jump, and certainly when he first starts to do it, he gets his coordination.
Exactly, and that's a nice touch. But his character as a whole, like, I just felt like I didn't really know him, which sounds crazy after a 2.5 hour, 3 hour film. And the same with how they meet and the relationship that they form. So as well as this CGI kind of world being so like spectacular, I felt like the actual story is just not strong enough.
It's just run of the mill, isn't it?
Outstanding.
Haven't gotten lost in the woods, have you?
Did you forget what team you're playing for?
T2 is a movie that changed the industry, that followed it. Avatar technically did that, but without the same kind of emotional impact. I don't know many people, when you see top 10 lists and stuff, that are going around going, oh, Avatar's one of my favourite movies of all time.
But it's got such a high rating on like IMDb. It made so much money. I met someone at like a work conference not long ago, and he was coming over to the UK, and he was so excited to go and see Avatar at the IMAX because he'd never had the chance to do it because he was from like Iceland, where they don't even have an IMAX. And so there is this core audience of people that absolutely love this film. But like you, Etok, I don't know that many of them. I've not met that many of them. Like, it's really strange.
In that how-to documentary that I mentioned on the last podcast, he actually goes into this like Avatar appreciation group, and it's really interesting actually. The people he meets, they're all people with like learning disabilities and people who have identified with this film on another level, and a lot of them have even learnt the language that because this is a whole new language that
1,000 words, they made it up, this sort of the script writer,
but these people have actually learnt this made up language, which like I said in this previous episode, this documentary kind of goes into this Avatar appreciation group, and I'm sure there's that kind of group for every film, but I think there is a great love for this film.
You've got 1 hour.
We knew this would happen.
Everything changed. Jake, it's crazy here. Quaritch is rolling and there's no stopping him.
We're going up against gunships with bows and arrows.
Well, I guess we better stop him.
I think the influences as well, like you look at the films, say for instance like Last of the Mohicans, and there's kind of that little nod to that with Wes Studi, who voices like the tribal leader of the Na'vi people, sort of really well known from Last of the Mohicans. It's almost got that element of The Last Samurai as well, where you've got the old versus the new, the two different technologies taking on each other. And then a lot of the sort of Studio Ghibli films as well. Again, we've talked about animation in the past, but the likes of sort of Princess Mononoke and films where there is that very conscious effort to reference sort of nature, the destruction of basically what humans are doing wrong. But it's done in such a formulaic way with loads of, don't get me wrong, extremely nice looking set pieces and battle scenes, but you're just not really invested in any of them. And even like Michelle Rodriguez pops up, and she had a really good run, sort of late 90s, mid sort of noughties, I would say. But her character's so underwhelming and so underutilized.
Completely forgettable.
Yeah, and it just seems to be a common trend in this film.
One character that I did quite enjoy in this film was the kind of sergeant guy, like the full metal jacket.
Colonel Miles, yeah, with this big scar across
and
his face.
And he looks like, I don't know if you guys seen, the Small Soldiers film. He looks like a small soldier.
He does, yeah. She does.
Like dull, and he's obviously made to look like that.
But Tommy Lee Jones voiced it in Small Soldiers, I think.
That's really
You're right.
Well.
The look was definitely Stephen Lang. I think he's probably owed royalties on that or something.
So, Nige's trivia?
Nige's trivia time.
Well, there's a couple of bits of trivia because it's obviously such a big film. There's obviously going to be quite a bit of random trivia. One of the bits of trivia was that during filming, James Cameron often had a nail gun with him. And you're thinking, why on earth has he got a nail gun? Basically, anytime anyone's cell phone or mobile phone went off, he would take the nail gun and shoot it into a wall because he was that bonkers about the silence on set. So
that's like Oliver Stone kind of style, isn't it? Jesus.
It ties into like Sigourney's representation of him being quite direct and quite passionate. But another sort of bit of random trivia is obviously Sam Worthington. Now, when they were first cast in this film, it was linked with the likes of sort of Jake Gyllenhaal, for instance. But Cameron decided he wanted someone who was an unknown so they could be known primarily for this character. And at the time, when he was offered the role, he was actually living out of his car, which sort of goes to show the levels. It's quite a similar story to Chris Pratt, who I think was in a very similar position when he got offered the role for Parks and Recreation. But the thing with Sam Worthington is he's Australian and he's playing essentially an American. And we discussed earlier the 1,000 words, the Na'vi language, and he said he actually found it harder to do an American accent than he did to actually learn the Na'vi language. So there you go. The trials and tribulations of being an actor in modern day Hollywood.
Wow, yeah.
Nice trivia. Okay, so I guess we've kind of given a clue to what all three of us kind of think generally, but yeah, what do we think overall, and what's our rating out of 10?
Now, for this podcast, obviously, sometimes we choose our own films, sometimes it's suggested by a listener, sometimes it's one of us suggesting to the rest of the group. Now, of all the films that we've had suggested to us, this was the one I was least looking forward to rewatching, just because when I watched it back in 2008 or however long ago it was, I just wasn't a fan of it at all. I just didn't enjoy it. A lot of the things I've said today in terms of feeling completely emotionally detached from it was the main things I remembered about it. Like I said, I forgot the fact that Sigourney Weaver was actually a good character. I thought she was a bad character. I was so just like meh about this, and unfortunately the only version I could get hold of was the extended edition, and I was like, oh god, it's long enough already. Now I've got to watch the extended edition.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I watched it. It's fine for what it is. Like, we've sort of discussed a lot of the points. It looks great. James Cameron clearly knows what he's doing. It's a strong cast, but it's just, like I said, it's like watching a 3-hour commercial. I'm just not invested in it. I'm not interested by it. I don't like it. I don't think I'd go and watch it again. I am not looking forward to these films.
We've got
2 to 5. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, and I appreciate that some people love this film, and good on you, but I don't. 4 out of 10.
Whoa! Wow,
he's done it. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think it's hard not to acknowledge, how kind of spellbinding the VFX are, and what he achieved. And quite honestly, Pandora is a place I wouldn't mind going, and I wouldn't mind kind of watching that part of the film just for that. I think he does bring you into that world, and he has kind of squeezed all of these ideas of his other films into this film. But for me, it is really predictable, pretty obvious. I think the cast do an okay job, but I think due to the writing of the dialogue in particular, it really bugged me, being clumsy and cheesy. It's a film I feel you could slip into a different world, but it's definitely not out of this world.
Very good. He's been practicing that all week.
That was like, that was the least spontaneous thing you ever said.
I was gonna say, I definitely wrote that line.
That could be a tagline.
I can't mark it as low, because I did still kind of enjoy, the kind of the VFX of it. So yeah, I'll go with what I wrote, which was a 6 out of 10.
Oh, okay.
I think, going back to my review just very, very quickly, I think if I'd have seen it in IMAX or perhaps in 3D, I may have been inclined to bump it to a 5 or a 6. But
fair
I didn't. So there.
You say that, Nige, as someone who did see it at the big 3D cinema in all its glory, and hollered and whooped at the end and wanted to tell the world that I'd seen this film.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your reviews for then and now, and like the comparison.
The fact that I think it all comes down to me. I started watching this film and I was like, oh wow, I don't remember any of this film. Forget about the story for a second. Just the dialogue. I was like, this is like really, bad dialogue. If you were to like close your eyes and just go, right, let's pretend there's no blue elves or anything like elves, no blue Smurfs or anything like that. Let's just close our eyes and listen. And it's just like, this is very bad dialogue. So my kind of review of this is, when you ignore the visuals and focus like solely on the story and characters, I don't think it's very good at all. Visuals. The visuals are the only reason this film has stayed in the public consciousness, and I understand that. I understand why. But as you were doing your review, Smith, I wrote down something, and I thought this is a good summary of this film for me. This film is great when you walk into PC World and someone goes, look what the HD telly looks like. And you're like, wow, look at that. And they'll show shots from Avatar. That's, to me, is like literally almost the reason for this movie. It's look what we can do with computers. In my review, I gave it one mark, and then because of the visuals, I raised it.
Yeah, same. But...
So, yeah, I was going to give this like script and story and everything. I was like, oh, this movie's a 3, but because of the visuals, I was like, I can't ignore that, so I give it a 4. So yeah, I'm the same as Nige, a 4 out of 10.
Fair enough. I did actually, a little while ago, I did a Twitter poll, and it's a really interesting one. This has kind of split the deck, as it were. So the options were amazing movie, decent, it's all right, and nearly turned it off. 25% were amazing, 37.5% were decent, 25% were it's all right, and 12.5% nearly turned it off. And then a couple of comments that people left. Shy Bergenfreund, I love that name. A great name. He said, just in a comment on Twitter, amazing visuals, really watchable, but overall not a great movie. And then Best Film Ever podcast said, what if we did turn it off? Alcohol might have been involved. We did have a little bit of a reply, and I said, what, you turned it off on your first watch? And they said, never went back to it. The runtime was so off-putting. So fair enough. They obviously, So yeah, and guys, what do you think of Avatar? Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. Find us on Facebook. Let us know what you think. What would your rating be? And get in touch.